Hello everyone, and in this video we're going to be talking about the OSI model and basically what's the OSI model on a high level. So, what is the OSI model? Now, the OSI model, also known as an Open Systems Interconnection, is basically a set of rules that is responsible for basically the communication of computer systems over a network. And now the OSI model is consisting of 7 layers. So 7 layers. And now we're gonna go basically from the high level layer, which is the application layer, to the lowest level layer, which is the physical layer. So the structure of the OSI model is as follows. So there's the application, then there's the presentation, and then there is the session, right? And then there is the transport, then there is the network, data link, oh, sorry, um, data link, and lastly is the physical, right? So these are basically the 7 layers of the OSI model. Now we're gonna start off with the application layer. So application layer. Now, what is actually the application layer? So basically, you know how on the internet or the network, there's what we call services. So, or more precisely, network applications. So network applications, they need a way to communicate and establish connections, to devices or whatnot. So the network applications basically implemented the application layer. Now, the application layer is what provides the users um, with what they see, right? Like the interface and stuff. And it does that based on protocols. So protocols. Now, these protocols are such as like SMTP protocol for mail services, SMTP protocol for mail services, and there is FTP protocol for file transfer services. So for file services, there is also the DNS for the network part, right? And then there is, of course, the one that most people like are familiar with, which are HTTP and HTTPS more commonly now. All these protocols are basically in the application layer, and they basically help the application layer communicate with the presentation layer and then session layer and so on. Now, next up would be what we call the presentation layer. Now, this layer basically allows for the encryption and decryption of data. So, and also the compression of data. So, whenever data is received from the application layer, right? From the application layer, let's call it app L. So, whenever data is being generated from the application layer and it wants to pass through the presentation layer, there's a process that we call translation. So a translation happens, So basically, ASCII is then generated into EB EBCDI, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just, confirm it in order to make sure that, you know, EBC EBCDI or EBCDIC. Oh yeah, I forgot the C. So EBCDIC. So if you want to know more about like what the like this conversion is basically in more depth, you can like comment down below. I can do a whole video about that. So okay, back to the topic. So basically the presentation layer does this translation, and it also compresses the data, compresses the data into smaller bits, for better transmission. And it also, like I said, encrypts the data, and also it's responsible for also decryption, decryption. And after the data becomes encrypted, it will be now in the form of what we call a ciphertext. Ciphertext, right? Now, after this data has been has been translated, compressed, and encrypted, it will then move on to what we call the session layer. Now, you might know, or you might like guess what the session layer is based on its name, of course, because the session layer is precisely what it sounds like. It basically is responsible for establishing a connection between the services and devices, um, where it manages the connection and terminates the connection. Any connection between the services is how the session layer manages it. And um, I think I also forgot to talk about something in the presentation layer, but it's fine. Let's now continue in the session layer. So for the session layer, um, it establishes the connection between devices, and protocol or something you might be familiar with if you use the Windows operating system is the NetBIOS. So basically, the NetBIOS is basically one of the protocols that are in the session layer. So you might have like used the NetBIOS for maybe you're trying to like reconfigure your virtual settings, or you're just like trying to, explore your operating system, right? So the NetBIOS is actually inside of the basically it's a protocol present in the session layer. And now the most important thing that you know we need to understand in the session layer where it's that it manages the connection, between devices or like services more accurately. Yeah, of course, before managing the connection, it needs to establish the connection, right? All of that happens inside of the session layer. Now, after the session layer comes what we call the transport layer. Now, the transport layer basically provides what we call provides certain services to the application layer, right? And these services, right? These services are known as, oh, one second, I don't know what happened, but yeah. The transport layer provides the certain services to the application layer, and whenever the data's been like in this layer has reached this point, the data is now what we call in segments, right? Segments. Now, these segments will then, after getting transported to the network layer, right? Network layer, these segments will be turned into what we call packets. Now, the network layer receives the segments from the transport layer and are now in the form of packets. And now these packets are now used in order to what we call do routing. Now you can think of routing as, you can think of routing as like a guide that helps the data to reach its destination. So you know that there is a source and a destination, right? So using what we call IP routing based on the Internet Protocol address or IP address of the source and destination, the network layer routes the data and sends it to the destination. And if I'm not mistaken, I forgot to talk about some protocols in the transport layer, which are the TCP and UDP, which are one of the most important and main protocols to know. And I'm just gonna like be brief about it, where the TCP is a connection oriented protocol, right? Protocol. um, And the UDP is a connectionless connectionless protocol, where the UDP basically it doesn't care, I guess you can say, it doesn't care whether the data has reached its destination. So an example of UDP would be like streaming services, right? Streaming services. And example of TCP protocols would be like, surfing the web, or like YouTube videos, for example, right? And whenever, if you go back to network layer, right, source, destination, right. Now, after all of that happens, we have what we call the data link layer, right? Data link layer. And now in this layer is where the packets that have been received from the network layer are then turned into what we call frames. Well, packets will be turned into frames. And now these frames are then um, going to be used to be transferred to the physical layer. So basically, the data link layer is responsible for providing um, a suitable format of data for the physical layer. And after the frames are then transferred to the physical layer, then the physical layer will convert these frames into machine understandable. Oops, what did I press? Okay, yeah. The frames will be then converted into machine understandable format, which is what we call bits. And the bits are in the form of zeros and ones. And the physical layer basically contains devices such as the cables that we use every day, such as the hub or the modem and stuff. Sorry. So all of that are basically in the physical layer. Okay. And yeah, um, a recap would be that in the OSI layer, we have 7 layers, which are the application layer, presentation layer, session layer, transport layer, network layer, data link layer, and physical layer. And these layers make up the what we call the OSI model, which is one of the most important frameworks to understand, as it is the cornerstone and the foundation of every service that's out there. And yeah, if you have enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe, comment down below some more information related to OSI or not related to OSI. And yeah, that's it for me. Thank you for watching the video.